or public session, sorry. Just a reminder for the folks in the back row that if you have to speak, you'll have to join one of the 3 microphones that are available to you so it can be heard. I'd like to note that Trustee Olmsted and Trustee Burgess are on the phone with us this evening. And Trustee Sartori, as a result of my decision to move the meeting by a week, resulted in a conflict for her, so she'll be joining us at some point once her other matter is resolved. With that, I will read the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are on land and surrounded by water, originally inhabited by Indigenous people who have traveled this area since time immemorial. This territory is within the lands honored by the Wampum Treaties, agreements between the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenape, and allied nations to peacefully share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Specifically, we'd like to acknowledge the presence of the Three Fires Confederacy, the Ojibwe, the Ottawa, and the Potawatomi, and the Huron-Wendat people. We dedicate to honoring Indigenous history and culture while remaining committed to moving forward respectfully with all First Nation, Inuit, and Métis. And with that, I'll look for any declarations of conflict of interest. Are there any declarations of conflict?
Mr. Chair, this is Trustee Olmsted speaking.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm going to declare a conflict of interest for agenda item F, which is actions of the board meeting private session, as my husband is a member of OSSPS and an employee of the board, and the interest would be pecuniary in nature. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Olmsted. Actions of the board meeting from private session. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're going to start with F1. Can I have somebody move F1? Trustee Hatfield, a seconder. Trustee Leclerc. All in favor? It passes. The next one is F2. Can I have a mover? Trustee Hatfield. Seconder is Trustee Leclerc. All in favor? And it passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. We'll now move on to approval of the minutes. I'd like to suggest that we move items G1 through G6 collectively. Trustee Hatfield, do I have a seconder? Trustee Sipkar, is there any discussion? Trustee Jean.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. And on page 6, the L4 notice of motion, and I don't see the motion is here. I think even its lack of a seconder is still useful message. It was not written here. L4, page 6. Yeah, it's a motion regarding the synchronous, 1 hour synchronous learning.
Melissa, do you have any comment?
So the motion never made it on the floor, so I just made a notation that it didn't make it to the floor because there was no seconder. So I wouldn't include the motion because it never made it on the floor.
And that's standard practice.
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, can I say something?
Go ahead.
Oh, I think it's not it's like a seconder, but the motion is from parents and from me. I think it's valuable motion, and I think it's necessary to be written in the minutes, and it won't hurt us if it's written there. So I just request that it was reflected in the minutes.
Trustee Hatfield.
Just a point of information that might help, but that L4 would have been written out on the agenda that accompanies the minutes. So it would have been printed for public information. Did you follow me? It's printed on the agenda for the meeting. And then because it didn't have a seconder, it's not an item for discussion, but on the agenda, it was printed in full. So the agenda goes with the minutes. It's like you got to read both. So it was printed on the agenda for that meeting.
And as Madame Leboeuf has pointed out, that's our normal procedure of reporting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any others on any of the items G1 through G6? I'll call the motion. All in support? Opposed? It's carried. Are there any minutes arising from the minutes? No minutes arising from the minutes?
He is now in
Oh,
the conference.
I'm not sure who just joined us. Who just joined us? Okay, minutes.
Juliana Hinchler.
Okay, thank you. Minutes arising from the, business arising from the minutes. Reading backwards. Business arising from the minutes. Items G1 through G6. No questions. Student presentations. Welcome to the boardroom.
Okay, so since the start of our term on August 1st, Isabel and I have been busy preparing for this year of little normalcy. We started our term by releasing a student input survey to receive direct input from students on what initiatives they'd like to see us focus on throughout the year. Our survey was open all of August and was very successful, collecting a total of 528 responses. The responses were exceptionally informative, and we look forward to presenting and discussing this data further at our first Student Senate meeting in October. Superintendent Hillman has asked us to support the Board Communication Committee by engaging student parliaments with positive information sharing through social media, such as sharing COVID-19 safety messaging with students. One of our main focuses for the past month has been increasing our presence on Instagram. With all secondary students participating in at-home learning, whether it's full-time or partial, we wanted to find a way to make regular updates and information easily accessible to students throughout the year. Isabel and I started by posting short bios and pictures to introduce ourselves as the city and county student trustees for the 2020 to 2021 school year. Once the back to school report was released, we posted and updated the account with changes to the plan, creating a total of 4 posts with visuals and information from the board site. Students would comment on these posts or message us directly with questions, and we'd respond with the information necessary or refer them back to the board's website. Returning to the school after the extended time off due to COVID-19 is difficult and stressful for many students. This is why we also created a post with student mental health and wellness resources and tips. In this post, we had links and short summaries of websites students can visit, including the GECDSB Mental Health and Student Wellbeing Student Resources page on the board's website. To go along with this post, we created a Student Wellness Back to School Bingo giveaway. Our bingo was a story game on Instagram where students were able to fill out a virtual bingo sheet with activities they've done for their well-being recently. By participating, students were entered into a giveaway for a GECDSB swag bag and a gift certificate to Staples for their back-to-school shopping. There were 2 winners, one from the city and one from the county. Through our efforts to interact with students and increase our presence on Instagram, we have gained over 300 followers in the past month. We are excited to continue to use and grow this platform to connect with students across the board. Most recently, Isabel and I have started brainstorming about how we might transform the 11th Annual Student Leadership Conference into the first ever virtual Student Leadership Conference. We are busy exploring how to use Microsoft Teams and other resources at our disposal to create an interactive and informative conference for student leaders. Lastly, we are happy to announce that during the summer, Isabel and I were both selected as Ontario Student Trustee Association's Working Group Co-Chairs, Isabel as Student Wellbeing Co-Chair, and myself as Ontario Student Voice Awards Co-Chair. We are looking forward to transitioning into these new roles throughout the next couple of months. Isabel and I would like to thank Director Kelly and the Board of Trustees for the opportunity to represent students and share their voice with you. We look forward to working with you and Senior Admin to make this year the best it can be for our students. Thank you.
Student Trustee Unger, do you have anything? Okay, so you're good? Okay, so I just want to thank you for your first official report in the boardroom. It's great to have you here, and I honestly think that this year amongst all the years that we've had student trustees, student voice is going to be very, very important. And we're going to be looking to you to be a sounding board and for you to advocate on behalf of the students, because we're in a year unlike any other, and 30 years from now you'll probably look back and think, wow, that was crazy. But we'll hope you enjoy your experience. There are no delegations. We have one person on the speakers list, and that would be Erin Roy. Ms. Roy, if you're on the phone, you have 5 minutes.
Hello? Yes, go ahead. Can anyone hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for allowing me to address members of the board on the topic of communication. As many of you know, American Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away last week. She was a hero of mine, just as she was and is to many women of all ages. In her words, we need to fight for the things that we care about, but we need to do it in a way that will lead others to join you. I lead with her words because I think it is appropriately applied to the Greater Ethics Board during these tumultuous times. My duty as the bargaining unit president is to voice the concerns of the secondary teachers employed by the board. Teachers are not feeling particularly supported by their employer these last few weeks, and it is of interest to the board to improve in this area. There is much to be said about employees that feel supported by their employer in their work, but this is especially true for teachers because the current government seemingly goes out of their way to actively cut frontline education workers out of their decision-making and then tries to lay blame squarely at our feet when things don't go well. I want to recap the recent events from the perspective of a teacher. In the spring of 2020, was full of uncertainty with the will we or won't we return to classrooms. But despite that uncertainty, teachers and education workers did their best to continue providing distance education to students. The board announced its secondary return plan early in August, and senior management and the union leaders spent many hours working together to problem solve and to come up with agreeable solutions given the ministry mandate. At a special meeting of the board on August 19th, a new secondary plan was announced without consultation from the union and without notice to the secondary teachers. This was particularly disappointing because we had given up local bargaining dates to continue in good faith with return to school planning. It did feel like a blindside tackle. The secondary plan changed again on August 27th. The plan was not directly communicated to the secondary teachers from their employer. Most found out from news outlets or the likes of Twitter and Facebook what their jobs are going to look like upon return.
Julia Burgess is now in the conference.
Leading up to the date when students would be attending schools, I continually expressed concern that teachers were not being given adequate time to prepare. The vast majority of teachers were waiting for the staffing shift due to the virtual school enrollment to settle out so that they could be told the courses that they would be teaching in Quadwester 1, despite the fact that 12 to 18-hour days were being clocked to prepare. It was clear to me that the amount of work required was too much to surmount and that a delay would be prudent. Grade 9 orientation occurred with little direction or communication. The teachers made it work to the best of their ability. The staggered start that was planned was inadequately communicated, and many of our secondary schools were following different schedules depending on the interpretation of the messaging. I advised senior management that there was a lack of clarity on this area prior to September 14th. On the eve of the staggered start, the board communicated to parents that teachers were responsible to communicate student scheduling with about 12 hours before students were to arrive. That directive was not communicated to teachers. Even if it had been directed, it was an impossible task due to the communication platform malfunction. A communication like this that gets sent out on a Sunday evening is overstepping the bounds of the employer-employee relationship. My pleas for delay were ignored, and community confusion ensued, and teachers were truly left to build the plane while flying it. There have been significant communication missteps. I mention all of these things so that the public and our board can fully appreciate that teachers are being directed to do impossible tasks and are trying their very best to rise to those challenges, but the stress inevitably takes its toll. I have a responsibility to protect my members from being treated unfairly, and I'm here to ask that communication to staff improve so that we can avoid confusion and disappointment in the future. Frontline staff deserve to be part of the decision-making process when decisions are being made that directly impacts their work. OSSPF has made a concerted effort to improve labor relations with the board. We have resolved numerous agreements and worked very hard to problem solve in areas where we have shared interests. In fact, most of the summer was spent consulting with the board on how to return students safely, given the parameters outlined by the ministry. It is only these last few weeks that we have fallen out of step with one another. I want to thank the board and senior management for the mountains of work that have been scaled. It has not been accomplished without frustration, determination, or tears, and I certainly can appreciate that. The pressure on everyone has been crushing and is at a level that I have not seen in my 17 years as a teacher. As an optimist and as a leader, I am a dealer in hope, and the hope that the struggle will always result in progress, despite the pressure of any given situation. The uncertainty of this era conjures fear that the vulnerable will fall through the cracks, given the limitations of the plan. That fear is causing great stress and anxiety, and those feelings are being projected. Leadership is required. Clear communication is a must, and respecting the boundaries of educators has to be prioritized. I offer to you that OSSPF is a willing dance partner and will put in the work to achieve those shared objectives as long as our voices are heard and respected. Our shared interests are the same, to provide world-class education to all students, and I think we all share the belief that public education is the great equalizer. Let us fight for the things that we care about, but do it in a way that inspires others to follow. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my remarks.
Thank you, Ms. Roy. Is there any questions for the speaker? No questions. Thank you very much. If you could supply a copy of your words to Madame Leboeuf, that would be much appreciated.
Already done. Thanks.
Thank you. We are on until new business. We have a notice of motion, and the recommendation is due to different opinions regarding synchronous online teaching between teachers and parents in order to uphold quality teaching of GECDSB. I suggest that GECDSB to do research on synchronous online teaching and to collect opinions from parents and provide a plan for future online teaching. Trustee Chin, would you like to make that motion?
Oh, that motion is made months ago, so I think it's already past the situation. I would like to withdraw it.
Jessica Sartori is
Thank,
now in the conference.
okay, thank you. Thank you for that, and welcome, Trustee Sartori. So item L1 is withdrawn by Trustee Chin. Moving on to item L2, which is a special education plan. Recommendation that the special education plan be approved as submitted. Trustee Hatfield, do we have a seconder? Trustee Cook, do we have somebody to speak to it, present to it?
Sorry, we don't have a presentation this evening on the special education plan, but I want to thank everybody and thank you for agreeing to pass this through. SEAC certainly was very supportive of it, and I feel it's a great, it provides the ministry and the public with a great insight into what we're doing at Greater Essex in terms of supporting our students with special education needs, so thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Question, Burgess?
Trustee Burgess, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is, I see the plan. I'm wondering, as needs get identified this year, what will be different for students in the who are taking the paper option versus the online option versus the in-person option versus if they are quarantined? How will you identify and support those students who, for example, a teacher may see something in a student that requires further assessment using the paper model, for example? How will it look in the different formats?
That's a great question. Thank you. Sorry. Sorry, Trustee Burgess. So our Special education coordinators are still aligned to their families of schools, and they are out there supporting teachers from each of those schools, and those teachers are using both them and LSTs from their home schools as resources to provide supports for students in terms of moving them forward for any sort of services or programming that they require.
So are there additional, Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
So for the Greater Essex virtual school students, for whom there are, I think, last count, 8,500 or so, when you say they're families of schools assessment, will that support be still aligned to the family of school from which they would have gone had they been in person? Is that what you're saying? And how will the instructors online be able to liaise with that family of schools, LST, et cetera, if they're newly identified, if it's a new identification, particularly?
That's again another great question. So in response to that, our special education coordinators are supporting those students. If they are new students, they are still meeting with coordinators and families with the classroom teachers to support their beginning in our school board. Certainly our LSTs are still supporting students and providing them with the support that they need. So in terms of all of the students from our community schools that are now in virtual are being supported by the learning support teachers, the education coordinators, and the psych and SLP staff. If a student is coming in with new needs, of course, our special education coordinators are made aware of that. And also, one of the things that we've done this year in terms of supporting the classroom teachers in virtual is that we had files prepared by learning support teachers and shared with classroom teachers so that they have an idea of the student's profile as they come into their classroom.
Trustee Higginson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Through you, thanks for this report. It's quite extensive, and I know it's barely touching the mountains of work that you already have. And now going forward, I'm sure we'll see more. We saw mental health supports in there, and I'm sure those will continue to increase. So I guess my question is around that. On handwritten 147 and 148 and over to 149. The positions reflected on here, I know we did receive some additional funding from the province toward mental health. Are those positions reflected in here, or have we not gotten there yet?
No, those positions aren't reflected in the special education plan. No, not yet.
Thank you.
Trustee Halberstadt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Superintendent Wilcox, I noted that there's a note in your report that with regard to accessibility of information, and a position has been posted for an individual to look at the content of our website through an accessibility lens. And I'm just wondering, has that position been advertised or created yet? And is it a permanent position or a contract position?
That's a great question, Trustee Halberstadt. That was a summer position that was created. We had a person who was on a contract for the summer who did a lot of work for us in terms of helping us make our many of our forms and our information packages online accessible. They also put a great deal of work into planning a PD session for this fall for our key communicators who write and upload information on our individual school board websites. And so this PD is going to help them to learn how to make these documents they're uploading more accessible.
So this is a student or students who are doing the work?
This is a qualified teacher who did the contract work during the summer.
This is a paid position, right?
Yes, it is.
Seeing no further questions, L2 is on the floor. It's been seconded. I'll call the question. All in support?
Support.
Opposed?
Support, Olmsted.
It's carried. Moving on to item L3, there's a recommendation that the board approve the following. 1, allocate appropriate funds for a www.publicboard.ca website redesign to permit new, innovative, accessible, and flexible online messaging and information sharing to better communicate with students, staff, families, and the wider community. And 2, hire additional staff 1.0 to develop, coordinate, and engage in website, social media, and other communication with students, staff, parents, guardians, and other community to significantly increase the Greater Essex County District School Board's website and social media presence and reach to better communicate with students and staff, families, and the wider community. And 3, that the work of the COVID Communication Strategy Committee ad hoc is completed. Trustee Sipkar, is that yours? You'll make that motion. Is there a seconder? Trustee Cook, any discussions? Would you like to speak to it? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was pleased to serve as the chair of the ad hoc committee, and I'm pleased to submit the report on behalf of the members to the Board of Trustees. 186 to 189 of your package. As you will have noted, the report contains some background information, a description of the work completed during our meetings, and recommendations for your consideration. The task of our committee was to explore new, innovative, accessible, and flexible communication methods and platforms. The committee spent the majority of our working time over the course of our 3 meetings in mixed role working groups comprised of student, parent, trustee, school administrator, and system staff voice. In following the intent of the motion, the committee explored communication methods and platforms that have the potential to enhance communication and information sharing with our families and our community over the course of the 2020-21 school year. The recommendations reflect these identified improvements in our system communications infrastructure that we believe can have a significant impact on our district's communication and information sharing capacity and effectiveness for years to come. In addition, the committee developed and shared a resource document that outlined key considerations for school and system communication throughout the year. The document will continue to inform our thinking on school and system communication throughout the pandemic. The committee also provided feedback and insight into a resource document for our school administrators that identified important returning to school messages and information for students and our families. I would like to thank the 15 members of the committee, as well as Beth Silverio for her administrative support. I am proud of and thankful for the effort of our committee of students, parents, trustees, school and system administrators and staff from the director's office as well. The team worked cooperatively and productively together, and I believe effectively addressed the mandate that we were given through the board motion to explore communication methods and platforms to better connect with our students, our staff, and our communities. So I'd like to provide an opportunity for the trustees who served on the committee to add any additional comments if they have any at this time.
Trustee Sipkar?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I just want to say thank you, first of all, to Superintendent Hillman for all the work that that he did with this. He led breakout groups. We had a lot of really good discussion, and I think that enabled a lot of this this work. And I don't think you have this in front of you, but there was a significant amount of like he said, work that also Ms. Silverio did to capture all of that. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. And so for my comments, as the mover of the original motion, so the intention was to have a discussion and give direction about what we could do better when it comes to communication, particularly building trust within our community. And I think that one of the things that we realized through the conversations that we had was the need to properly resource our administration. That simply some of the needs of the community that have significantly changed over the last, I'll say decade, and then have been completely exacerbated by COVID with the move online, meant that our staff were feeling really overwhelmed with the level of communication that was required. I also think too that we needed, one of the things that we heard as well was the need to create an ecosystem to support staff and students during this time so that the message to the community was the same and consistent. And so, you know, I noted in the student trustees presentation tonight about using Instagram, and I follow you, and I get a lot out of that. So we brainstormed a lot of ways that, you know, what are the ways that our families are connecting? And it's happening a lot online. It's happening a lot through social media. And so the reason for the recommendation was having somebody, so I'll speak to just number 2 specifically, was to have somebody dedicated to not just coordinating our own board's social media, that, you know, we have that in in some fashion, but really to actually resource I think our staff and all the schools. And if I'm speaking out of turn, Director Kelly or Superintendent Hillman can kind of jump in, but I think that was really the thrust of the conversation, is making sure we have the ecosystem to have good communication at all of our schools at all level, and having somebody dedicated to that is really important when staff are so stretched right now, and a lot of the issues that we've had have been exacerbated by COVID. And so I say all that, knowing that even with these recommendations, we've had some significant issues over the last few weeks, because no one could have predicted, technical glitches right before the reopening, nor ministry changes within the last few weeks before school opening. And so I say all this not to solve all of our problems, but really, again, to resource our staff in a better way, and also create that ecosystem to generate better communication and trust within our community. So I'll look to my other fellow trustees who are part of the committee if they have anything else they want to add to that.
Trustee Higginson?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, through you, and thank you to Dr. Hillman, to your team, to Beth especially, and to the members of the committee, and to my fellow colleagues here. I'm not going to go over. I agree with Trustee Sipkar and her analysis of the recommendations that we came up with, and also to say that it's interesting, and Trustee Sipkar may echo me on this, it's interesting to wear two hats in this scenario where I am both a trustee and also a parent. So where I can see that there are necessities that we have as a board that I would benefit as well as a parent, I'm happy to recommend these things to that end. And I think that we had that representation and that voice on our committee, not just from parents, but from staff as well. And there was a great deal of talk about supporting not just information sharing, but also the kinds of different environments that we're going to find ourselves in. We have two simultaneous experiences going on with our students and our families, and making sure that I guess we have three. We have packet learners, we have online learners, and we have face-to-face learners. And to try to streamline all of those things is quite frankly quite a bit for one person to handle, and we wanted to make sure that we used the needs of our community, our full community, and use the resources that we currently have and built upon those. So yes, not a panacea of any kind to the issues that we know that we face, that we have faced recently, but this is a start to make sure that that we honor the needs of all of our learners, of all of our families, and of all of our community members who are experiencing their educations in really different ways, and to really support, just as our speaker earlier today was referring to really support the very unique circumstances that we're all finding ourselves in, our staff included and our administration included. So I'm grateful to the committee. Thank you so much. It was actually a really cool experience to do virtually. I'm very impressed with how it went, and I'm happy to support these recommendations tonight. So thank you to everyone.
I just want to say thank you to Superintendent Hillman. I had a really good time. It was very interesting working the way we worked, to hear everybody else's opinion. And that's all I'll say, because I do agree with Trustee Higginson and Trustee Sipkar, so there's no use me repeating what's already been said.
Trustee Chin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, all the committee members, and I want to thank you, all the senior administration, for the good job that you did for opening the school. It's really hard, I understand. Although there are some confusion and mixed up, that's normal, and I fully appreciate your hard work. And I understand that it's a good suggestion that you want to improve the website and the communication skills, the communication platform. I wonder, due to current registration period, there are some kind of chaos and miscommunication. I wonder if we can have a simpler way right now, such as a hotline, help desk, something like that, that we can respond to the students' requirement within 24 hours. Because I know some students, they missed classes and they worried too much, but they try to contact and sometimes they cannot get enough, immediate respond, and their parents also worried. I think if we can have a similar way right now to improve the communication, like a hotline. I know some other boards did that, and or help desk. They can write their request and in the help desk, and someone can get communicated within 24 hours. That can solve the problem immediately. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I was just going to point out that that's not part of this motion, so you're kind of straight off a little bit. So I take that you support the motion that's before us. Okay. Does anybody else? Trustee Halberstadt?
Yeah, I have a few questions, and certainly I'd commend all the work that's being done here, and that was obvious from people that were speaking tonight. I just have, there are a couple questions, though I do have, with regard to how much it will cost, who will be reporting to who, when was the last website overhaul, will this be a complete overhaul, and what would the budget be? Has that been determined yet, and out of what budget will that come? I know that's about 5 questions in one, but I'll try to. What's that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that was 5 questions, Trustee Halberstadt. With respect to number 2, the additional staff, that would be at a level of what kind of a position we're hiring, in line with the roles and responsibilities that a person in a school board would take on. So, I think you can estimate that would be a good salary, and that would be commensurate with what we would normally pay someone. So again, it would depend on the roles and responsibilities in the job description as defined, which has been actually very helpful, what is in here to do that. With respect to the other, which is the website, I believe that's a fairly large ongoing cost. I don't think it would be all at once, but I looked to Superintendent Mills, who was going to do some investigation, preliminary investigation into that, to give us some numbers.
Yes, we did some very preliminary discussion with the website as part of the committee, and part of the work going back was looking at, excuse me, some sites that we could that we would be able to use, update. We would be looking at a one-time cost of around $300,000, between $350,000. Part of that would be spent out over a period of years. There would be work that would have to be done in stages. So we would be looking at an initial stage for next year, and moving forward, costs would go forward on that basis.
Okay, just supplementary. So that would be the 500 or the 350,000. Would be over a period of how many years? 2, 3 years?
Well, because we haven't got a firm plan in place, I would say that some of that work would be done this year. We'd probably be looking at a cost of about $100,000 this year, and then additional costs in the next couple of years.
Would that include the hire, the 300?
No, that's separate. That would be separate from the website.
Okay.
Can I move on?
Pardon? Yeah, go ahead.
Trustee Burgess?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, thank you to the committee. I look at the makeup of the committee since we passed the motion, and I see that it's a great committee put together with, the superintendents and principals and an executive assistant and the PRO and parent representatives, both student trustees and 3 trustees. So I know that everyone on this committee has a real good sense of existing online support that we have. And so the recommendation coming forward is knowing that we have to do some additional online communication. But when this motion passed back in June, I didn't expect to see this report. I'm supportive of the report, but Mr. Chair, through you, if I could, I want 1, 2, and 3 separated because I don't support number 3, and I would like to express that in a separate vote. I understand the recommendations to allot funds. This, to me, is an ongoing thing. We've refreshed our website and put significant monies into it on an ongoing basis in a cyclical way over the last, 20 years anyway that I'm aware of, even longer. And that's, of course, due and ongoing, and I support that. But my question is, when I looked at when I approved and supported the motion, the original motion, I thought this was a communication strategy and explore new, innovative, accessible, and flexible communication methods and platforms. And the recommendations only go to something that is online. There isn't anything about community outreach in other traditional or non-traditional ways other than online. And I'm wondering why we put all the eggs in that basket. And I say that because when I look at the report and over the meetings, for example, on handwritten 188, I see that, part of the additional staff would be to provide assistance and support, professional development to schools administration staff to develop effective website and social media skills, so build capacity, in other words, and to highlight good news stories and enhance school-based communication. I just want to go back to, again, the end of August, beginning, Labor Day and over Labor Day and into our school reopening. Part of really an effective communication strategy using new, innovative, accessible, and flexible communication methods would also be sharing some not-so-good news stories. And part of the ironic part is I enter this meeting halfway through presentations because I had a difficult time entering into the phone communication from the previous meeting. So there's a little irony there. But I think I did hear from a presenter, and I believe it was a union head, I believe it was Ms. Roy, who talked about how effective, innovative, accessible, and flexible communication methods, what a difference that can make in building trust, in sharing the truth about a situation. And all I see is an improved website and and a redesign and additional staff. I fully support those. But I'm wondering about the other piece. Was that an unreal expectation of mine that the additional, the better improved communication strategies that would come forward would be just not online?
So, Trustee Burgess, I'd like to direct you to item 2, where it says hire additional staff to develop, coordinate, and engage in website, social media, and other communications with students, staff, parents, guardians, and our community. So my interpretation of and other is other methods.
So then my question would be, can I hear some concrete examples? Because I didn't see them in the report. I didn't hear them from my colleagues when I have interacted occasionally over the summer while meetings were taking place. What things other were described or talked about? Because I don't see it anywhere in the report. What other things?
Superintendent Hillman.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you. So the committee began from the standpoint of evaluating and reviewing the motion as passed. I had an opportunity to partner with the author and mover of the motion to make sure we were accurate. The Communication Strategy Committee is the title. The task is to explore new, innovative, accessible, and flexible communication methods. Use of video, etc., became powerful, and platforms, Instagram, new emerging platforms. So that became the start of the motion. The work for the meetings started with asking all stakeholders to identify effective communication in these experiences, and we generated and produced and shared information that became very helpful for our schools. We identified the use of student-focused messaging. How and when do we send our messages about COVID or about anything specifically to students? That turned into engaging with our new student trustees to tackle that task. It involved meeting with board staff to make this part of Student Senate. So part of what came out of that will be different action from Student Senate. Discussions talked about the value for parents of having a direct hotline in August to discuss these concerns. What do you mean by the models? The result of that was for us to implement a hotline that received literally thousands of calls, where we spent days and days supporting parents. So the task of the committee was to explore this type of new communication, and many of those actions have happened already and continue to happen. We produced a document for all administrators. What is it that students and families need to know before returning to school? What is it that you can send in August about hand sanitizing, about reminding students to wear their masks at home? That produced a 4-page document that was given to all administrators. The recommendations come to trust. Those are operational matters, and we benefited greatly from the thinking of the committee. The strength of that committee was that a student, a parent, a principal, a trustee, and a system person sat in planning groups and thinking groups together so that all areas were covered. So significant understanding and action has taken place from there. Recommendations to the Board of Trustees were brought forward based on those that would have impact on budget. So it was critical for us to take the information that emerged in July and share that in July with our operational staff, to take the thinking that came out in August and give that to principals in August. So significant thinking went into all of the items that you've identified. The recommendations in terms of new platforms and new communication methods that have implications on budget and require trustee support are the two that were brought forward.
Thank you, Superintendent Hillman. I believe
That
Trustee...
didn't quite, Mr. Chair, supplemental, that didn't quite, thank you for all of that. I understand all of that. It's still almost all electronic. I didn't hear anything about our most vulnerable students, how you're going to connect with those who don't have adequate broadband, don't have the skills with virtual online, can't be supportive, have language barriers, are on either one of those 4 different paths, whether somebody's in, quarantine versus in-person, or the student and family who's doing paper offline, or any of those things. I didn't see any of that differentiation, and I guess I was expecting that. So I support the motion 1 and 2. I don't support 3. I don't believe the work of this committee is over, because I don't believe we're out of the woods. So I think that it would be prudent to continue the COVID Communication Strategy Committee, because I think things will morph once there are changes in place in November and people shift in delivery, et cetera. And I believe that the website's not going to magically be, changed in a minute. I don't think the person who, once this is, I do believe there'll be support for number 2 once the additional staff comes on it. There's a lag there. So I don't believe that the work is finished, and I would ask the support of my colleagues to defeat number 3, because I believe that this committee should report back on an ongoing basis while we are under emergency measures under the province. Thank you.
Okay, so at the moment, we have a recommendation on the floor that includes all 3. I believe Trustee Burgess would like to separate those. I believe that would require a seconder. No, it can just be separated?
I think, Mr. Chair, it's always in order if somebody asks for something to be separated.
Okay, thank you.
It's not.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we will separate them, but we'll continue to entertain questions or comments collectively, and then we'll vote on each individual one when I call the vote. Trustee Hatfield for the first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So when I first looked at this, my first reaction to number 1 and 2 was to say no way, and I'll explain why. Not too long ago, we approved a budget that that did have some controversial debate about whether or not we needed to go deeper into our surplus to accommodate COVID needs in the classroom. And from there, we were bombarded with emails and phone calls from parents who want to see more money spent on supports in the classrooms, who are upset about the large number of split classes that we now have, and why aren't we putting more teachers in the classrooms to avoid that, and on and on. So when I first saw this, I went, wow, I know how much it costs to redesign the website. It's not the first time we've had to go through that, and it's very expensive, and it's not been budgeted for. I know that we're looking at least $100,000 to hire a new staff member, and there's no timelines on there, whether this is a permanent staff member forever and ever. And I said to myself, I said, how can we do that? Just after we just approved the budget, there's been no inclusion for these expenses. However, I see the merit of the intent, and that's where I had difficulties. Because we were talking, you know, potentially $250,000 out of this year's budget that hasn't been budgeted for. And will, I guess, take us into dipping into our surplus rather than using it for classroom expenses that it was intended. So I do have some concerns about that. I have some concerns about whether or not the majority of parents would feel that that's how we should be spending our money at this point in time. Although I totally understand the benefits, I'm just really uncomfortable that we're, you know, a month after approving the budget, and now we're adding substantial expenses to our budget. I would like to know, I do have a question specifically. It's a two-part question. One is, was there consideration to updating the job responsibilities of the public relations officer? Because we do have a person on staff who I assumed that these kind of things were part of that portfolio. And I know that when we decided as a board to even hire someone in the area of public relations, it was quite controversial that we should spend our money that way. And now I don't know how we would manage without one, but perhaps the focus of that job position has changed and needs to be updated. And I don't know if the committee considered that. So I'd like to know if that was considered, and if this is meant to be a permanent staff position. And then I would like to, I guess, have more assurance that there's enough full-time work to have two people doing what I consider to be public relations. So I'd like to have some answers to that, please. I didn't find those answers in the report.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to comment on the committee's work, and then if the director would care to add, that would maybe be helpful. The role of the committee as we developed it was to identify the work that we thought would be beneficial to the board. What does highly effective communication look like for our parents now? What do we think is essential? And that was the basis on which we developed the recommendations. So the committee, as a group of 15, didn't do a task of saying could that be assigned differently or something like that. The question was, what do we identify as critical? What I can tell you, and I respect that it's wordy. We've done our best to try to translate both the good thinking of the committee about things they value, but phrase it in a way that makes sense to the people who are doing the hiring, etc. Currently, in 2021, how social media platforms are used is significantly different than it used to be. As my 14-year-old daughter will tell me, Dad, that's not for Instagram. Instagram, that needs to be a video. So this whole notion of multiple platforms, parents accessing our systems primarily through their phone. Our current system wasn't developed to work well on phones. It's difficult to search. So we went with what do we think is the essential work moving forward. And this was identified as new, different, and distinct work that we think has the potential to positively impact the board's communication moving forward. So that's the approach from the committee.
If I could, through you, Mr. Chair, I'd just add to that. I do think in the area of communications, there are different roles, as we noted, the public relations officer in terms of speaking for the board sometimes, but also the new practices that are there. And I do believe we are, compared to other Ontario school boards of the same size, we are light on that area, just to make that comparison. Because there are different roles and there are different things that we could perhaps be doing that we don't have the resources or time to do.
Sorry, I didn't get an answer to whether or not this is a full-time position and that hasn't been budgeted for.
It is it was the intention, I'm assuming from the committee too. Again, I wasn't on the committee, but would be that it would be a full-time position. And you're right, it was not budgeted for, you are correct.
And the same for hiring someone to do the website? Is that temporary, like on contract, or is that full-time as well? You need personnel for that.
Sure. I look to Superintendent Mills, but my understanding is that we would do an RFP for that and certainly have different vendors assist us with that. I don't know that it would require additional staff, maybe staff resources, but perhaps you can speak to that.
Yeah, very much what the directors just mentioned, that it would be an RFP that goes out. We'd have a company that would do the work for us. There would be some money budgeted for next year for that. That was something that we were going to look at for next year. Approximately $100,000 we had budgeted as part of the IT budget for next year for website redesign.
Yes. So you're not planning on doing anything on that this year? Is that what you just said? That you would put it in the budget for next year? So there's not going to be any work started now?
I think we could do some of the preliminary planning for it this year. I think under our current circumstances, it might be very difficult to get that work completed during this year. So we would be looking at next year.
Sorry. Okay, so I need to hear how we're going to pay for this. Like I said, I understand the intent. I understand the good results we're going to get. But like I said, we just passed the budget a month ago, and now we're adding in a big expenditure that was not planned at all. And I don't take hiring of additional staff lightly when we're struggling in our classrooms. So I really need to be clear on how we're going to justify the expense to this budget, the current budget.
Who would like to speak to that?
It's Director Kelly. I'm not I was not on the committee, but I believe that the committee feels that this would be an important way to use money, and also this would come out of our revised estimates. So no, it was not budgeted for. I don't know if you have any additional comments from the committee.
Thank you, Madam Director. The committee was given a task of exploring options that would improve this work, and that was a task we were pleased to do, and that's what we've provided. This group did not engage in discussions about budgetary, challenges that this brings. The thinking was that there would clearly be budgetary challenges, and that is why these would come forward in the form of recommendations to the Board of Trustees for your discussion. That our task was to explore what could be enhanced or improved moving forward. That was the task that we gladly accepted.
Trustee Sipkar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to echo what Superintendent Hillman said, I think it would have been inappropriate to have those conversations with the committee members, just because it was more about what do we need, and then the response from administration in the form of these recommendations is that this is what it would take. And I appreciate the point about budgetary constraints, and I honestly don't believe it was an either or situation in terms of using surplus funds for in the classroom or this. I think at all levels, all governments are struggling to pay for the pandemic, and I think that we're no exception, and I think that this is a necessary expense in light of the challenges that we face and also the direction that we want to move in. And so while I still support having more resources for teachers in the classroom, I made the motion, I still support that. I think this is designed to do something different, and it's supposed to it's designed to support all of our staff, students, families, and I just think that it will come out at revised estimates, and if that is something that needs to be taken out of our surplus, I don't know if that needs to be said right now. I look to administration for that answer, but again, I am very supportive of it and would change the motion to accommodate that if it needs to be said, but I think, again, it's more about allocating the resources to be able to do this work. That's, I guess, the task of the trustees to make that decision.
Trustee Halberstadt.
Yeah, I don't know how close we are to a vote, but yeah, I would like it to also to split the motion. I would be in support of the first one, is to update the website. I think that's needed. But we look at what happened with the Special Education and the Disabilities Act. They hired someone for the summer. Mr. Wilcox had just told us that. And I think we could do some of that without splurging. This is going to cost us, with extra position, onward towards $500,000, and to do that before we even get into budget discussions, to me, is not appropriate. So I would like the motion split.
The motion is split. Trustee Cheen, and then I'm going to call the vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And since this motion is regarding communication strategy, I want to give some comment that based on my observation, the key point of miscommunication is not because of the, technological issue, media or website. I think that's enough. The key problem is that the request from parents and are not responded at all. And it is not technical, issue. It's an administration issue, management issue. And I heard a lot of parents say that they called and leave a message or send emails and no response at all. So they're frustrated with that. So my point is that currently, regardless of the money, we have to, pay more attention on the response to build up the community confidence to us, the parents' satisfaction to us, that when a student cannot register for several days, if they come up to us to ask help, someone has to respond. Even if you cannot, solve it, immediately, you have to respond. It's really, frustrating if we don't respond, and they feel, so bad they even want to move to other board. So what I mean is that the key point is to improve the administration and management, to have someone to, to monitor the request and to evaluate it and to make sure it was
Trustee Cheen, that's a bit outside what the motion is.
Okay, the last sentence. To make sure it was responded within a criteria like 24 hours or 48 hours.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, Trustee Sipkar.
Just want a recorded vote, please, for all three.
Okay, thank you. My only comment would be that I heard over and over again from all kinds of people, from students, parents, teachers, that there's a lack of communication. We heard from the union tonight that there's a lack of communication. No fault to anybody, but there's a gap. And this goes to closing that gap, or at least I hope it does. So I'm going to support it. So I'll call item number 1 from L3. We are requesting a recorded vote, so I will go around the room first. On item 1, Trustee Cook. Trustee Halberstadt. Trustee Sibkar.
Support.
Trustee Hatfield. Trustee Cheen.
Support.
Trustee Higginson.
Support.
Trustee Sartori. Okay, Trustee Burgess.
Support.
Trustee Olmsted.
Support.
Trustee Sartori. Trustee Sartori. I thought I heard her. Student Trustee Unger.
Support.
Thank you. Yeah, I can hear you now. I'm sorry. I thought I could hear you, but I wasn't 100% sure. Thank you. Student trustee Sauve, is that right? Suave.
Support.
Thank you.
Okay, that's Trustee Sartori. You can hear me?
Yes, there's some feedback, but it might be because my microphone's on. Okay, item number 1 is carried. Item number 2 is a recorded vote. I'll do the same thing. Trustee Cook. Trustee Halberstadt.
Opposed.
Trustee Sipkar. Trustee Higginson.
Support.
Trustee Cheen.
Support.
Trustee Hatfield. I'm in support. Trustee Sartori. Trustee Sartori, we can't hear you again. Trustee Burgess.
Support.
Trustee Olmsted.
Support.
Trustee Sartori. Student Trustee Unger.
Support.
Student Trustee Sauve. I'll get it yet.
Support.
Support. Okay, thank you. Item number 3. Trustee Cook. Trustee Halberstadt.
Support.
Trustee Sipkar.
Support.
Trustee Higginson.
Support.
Trustee Cheen.
Opposed.
Trustee Halberstadt. Trustee Hatfield. I'm in support. Trustee Sartori.
Support.
Got you loud and clear that time. Trustee Burgess.
I'm opposed, and I believe
Support.
Halberstadt said he was opposed initially. Does he know that number 3 is
I think he's aware of what he's voting for.
all right? I'm opposed.
Trustee Olmsted.
Support.
Trustees Unger.
Support.
Student Trustee Sauve.
Support.
Suave. Support. It's carried. Okay, moving on to item L4. Plan to welcome international students. Recommendation that the board approve the International Students Program, which meets the federal and provincial requirements for 2021 school year. Who's going to speak to this?
Good evening. Through you, Mr. Chair. On August 28th, 2020, all school boards in Ontario received a memorandum from the Ministry of Education requesting that we submit documentation that we are ready to safely accept international students for the 2020-2021 school year. In your enclosure, you have a comprehensive series of documents that detail our school board's plan. I'd like to thank our International Students Program lead, Michelle Marcus, for her consultation with other school boards while preparing several of these documents to ensure that we are compliant with federal and provincial requirements. I'd like to thank Superintendent Dr. Pike for her contributions to the documents in terms of student wellness, anti-bullying, and her consultation with our local health unit on outbreak protocol. One of the requirements of the Ministry of Education is that we have a board resolution approving our International Students Program. So as Chair Leclerc mentioned, it is that the board approve the International Students Program, which meets the federal and provincial requirements for the 2020-21 school year. I'd be happy to answer any questions to the Board of Trustees about this recommendation.
So before I go to questions, I'd like to get it on the floor like I should have done in the first place. Trustee Hatfield and seconder, Trustee Cheen. Questions? Trustee Hatfield?
Yes, thank you, and thank you for the report. I noted that all students who are not currently in the country have been deferred until the second semester. One part of my question is, are we anticipating additional students in the second semester? And the other part of my question is, it's also noted that there are financial implications to the plan and to bringing in additional students in the second semester, but that the ministry is not providing any additional funding. So again, funding crunch that we're going to experience.
So the first part of the question is about the deferral. We have 25 students that we had to defer to second semester. Unless this plan is approved federally, then we won't be able to welcome them. So this plan has to be approved first. And the second part of your question was about financial. Yeah, for this plan, they're not providing any funding, but that doesn't affect the students coming in later on. It's just for this particular plan. Certainly, if we're not permitted to have international students come in second semester, then that will affect our funding.
Trustee Chin, do you have a question?
Oh, yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And actually, I have already discussed with you regarding the point that the international student abroad that can refuse to use online teaching to register, and compared with other school board, they allowed, even in Windsor, the Catholic school board, they allowed them to register. So from my acknowledgement that a lot of students, they are considering transfer, and agents are advertising doing that. So I wonder why. It's kind of make us in a weak situation if we announce it. And if we have the same technology issue problems to conquer, why we stand up first to refuse the abroad students. So I wonder if you can, make it clearer. Okay.
Certainly, Trustee Chin. Thank you for the question. There are two reasons why we chose to defer the students and not to have them do the virtual learning. The first is pedagogical. After listening to the community, listening to our trustees, and listening to our parents, our virtual school is synchronous. And part of the problem with having students go on synchronously when they are in another country, it could be midnight when we're asking students to go on. That's not the largest problem. The largest problem, and I'll look to Superintendent Mills in a moment, the largest problem is about the security of our systems and the ability for us to, some of the tools that we use are blocked and could be blocked at any time, including GECDSB, Microsoft Teams, D2L. These could all be blocked at any time. Furthermore, we could block items that are coming in from another country if it seems unsafe to our system. I don't know if I covered that, Superintendent Mills. But, okay.
Supplementary?
My question is that those technical issues are faced by all the boards, but why other boards allowed them to register, and we kind of kick out those students, and they are moving to other boards?
Again, thank you for the question. We're simply not willing to take the risk to our systems. We are designed for Windsor-Essex students and students that are on Canadian soil, and it could potentially compromise our security if we allowed people to somehow get into our firewall from out of the country.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? No other questions? I'll call the vote.
Oh, can I have a question? Another question. The international students, I know abroad they are not allowed to register, but once they come here, some are flied immediately, even by expensive, air ticket to come here. But based on this policy, they still cannot register online immediately. Even within the 14 days, quarantine days, they still can study online. So what I mean is that I heard that you already, said it's okay for them to be online study to keep the pace, but this rule kind of refused them until postponed to the next semester.
Yes, and we would love for them to be on Canadian soil when we could begin educating them virtually once they're here doing their 14-day quarantine. However, unless we go through and get permission from the federal government by going through this process, we won't be allowed to do anything with them.
Supplementary. I think online teaching, they don't physically move out. It has nothing to do with the federal government's issue. They stay at home and learn online.
Trustee Chin, this motion has to be passed for us to do what you're asking them to do. That's the point of this motion. It is from the federal and provincial governments.
Okay.
So item L4 is on the floor. It's been seconded. All in support? Opposed? It's carried. Reports to be received. Report of the Director of Education.
I think I'm going to see something on the operational plan come up here in just a moment. All right. Through you, Mr. Chair, the 2019-2020 was a school year that was certainly challenging, and EQAO testing was canceled, labor action occurred, the COVID context that made for some variations in our regular school year. That being said, I think we met a number of our goals, and I want to thank the Board of Trustees for their leadership and the staff and students for their hard work and flexibility as we worked together to navigate what was a very unusual and unpredictable year. I thought I would just provide a few of the highlights that link with our operational plan in the area of confident learners. Though we didn't have EQAO measures, we saw an increase in many of our digital tools that support literacy and numeracy. For example, Lexia, they provided us with unlimited licenses. Resorbits was another resource that people used a lot across the system, and Knowledge Hook in the area of mathematics. So we did see a real increase in those resources, which have been proven very valuable, for example, across our system in those areas. Another area to highlight, if you look on page 13 of the report, you'll see there that we talk about our ELL learners. They made some great gains. Now, the measurements there largely reflect the movement between June 2019 and the January 31st, 2020 period. But I think you'll see there that our ELL students made some really great gains in terms of the steps that they were able to achieve. I think it speaks to the commitment of our educators to our ESL and ELL students, so I wanted to point that out. Also, you'll note that we saw within that, in summer learning, summer learning was another area that I think we really made some gains. Now, we have a really extensive summer learning program, probably one of the most robust in the province. Then you move to a virtual learning environment, and of course the group rose to the occasion under Dr. Howard's leadership. They really worked hard to make sure that the students knew the technology, were attended to, had really good programs. And so you will see on page 28, there's a goal articulated there about reducing the summer slide for students in Camp Wonder, particularly in the area of mathematics, for example. We saw 89.86% of the 69 marker students. Marker students are those students which you select to monitor. They demonstrated growth on the post-math assessment. And again, with the comprehension strategies that we're focused on, we saw increased use of and improvement in the areas of retell, relate, reflect, and review, which are all important comprehension strategies. So even though we moved to online for summer learning, I think we saw some interventions there that were really helpful to our students. We had a delay in some of our ability to do things, there were some things within, I'd still go back, I'm still on the first one, but it was when we look at practicing and promoting positive, healthy behaviors, for example, within that first, in the confident learners bucket. There, we focused on kindness. There was a lot of focus on kindness week last year, and I think that that's an important message that we've carried through, and that's been certainly was reiterated throughout our year. Restorative practices, which I know Trustee Burgess in particular thinks highly of restorative practices and the importance there, and I know Superintendent Dr. Sharon Pike worked really hard with a number of people to ensure that we had training in that area. So this year we had 25 administrators trained, 28 elementary teachers, 80 secondary school teachers, and 88 support staff. Again, I think an important reflection of what we're doing to promote and practice healthy and positive behaviors. In the area of engaging our communities, a lot of work was done this year in gathering parent perspective. For example, I know Dr. Hillman took a lot of time to put together surveys and bring them back out to us in terms of what the learning was from them. And subsequently, there was, for example, a production of a manual about online learning. The communication committee work that you heard here today, I think, is a reflection of the kind of work we're trying to do to engage our communities and to be able to be responsive to our communities. And so I thank the communications committee for their work. In the area of embracing diversity, which I know is something that's very important to all people in the board, is that we're in year 3 of the implementation of the NBE course, which is The course that we've decided all students would take, the Indigenous, it's an English course for grade 11 students with an Indigenous focus, and we've shown strong success rates in that area, so we're really proud of that work and really glad that our students are getting that perspective in the curriculum. There were many partnerships that were developed in terms of engaging our communities. I think a number of them are listed there. The Anderton Child Care, the Delta Chi Beta Early Childhood Center at the Davis Public School are just a couple of examples of those kind of partnerships. Some other things we did in terms of making sure that our students were on the literacy, and I know the trustees are concerned about the kinds of gaps and how we can work with our parent community as well. The Empower Reading program, there were a number of evening sessions for parents that learned about what caused, like why we have reading difficulties, what that looks like, how to use Empower. There were 9 schools that participated in that. Parents indicated after that they had gained a better understanding of the reading issues, why they exist, and the Empower program, and how they could use it to assist their children. On page 25, you will notice, and I know this has been something when we talk about engaging our communities that's really important, is you'll notice the translation of forms and documents this year has been a top priority. The parent consent forms for OEAP, there were all kinds of video, even the recent video that was produced by Kennedy students called Hazards was translated into Arabic. So there's been a lot of work in that area, and I think there's a nice list of the different forms and documents that make things more accessible for our communities. In the area of ethical stewardship, which is our next slide. It doesn't matter where we're going. Okay, we had 90 projects completed in 47 schools. Now, when you think about that from a facility staff perspective, that is really quite amazing. Really proud of the work that our staff has done there. 75 of those projects were also completed by the start of school, which again, in the COVID context, that's a really impressive timeline. We also got ministry approval for things like the Kingsville, North Shore, approval to proceed with JL Dunn, the Legacy Oak, and the Western Amherstburg project, which we have talked about before, but I mean, a lot of those things are really coming along despite all the delays with the COVID experience. We saw energy consumption reductions. Now, I looked at this and I said energy consumption reduction, which of course is important for us, about 9%, and then the reduction in natural gas by 8.5%. But I thought, well, students weren't at school then, that would have been naturally realized. But no, we were actually on track to realize those savings. So again, I think really important work that we're doing in terms of savings. We completed the retrofit for the LED lighting, which now it was completed 22 schools in the last year, and now we're at the end of that project. We saw a reduction, I thought this was another interesting one, reduction in the number of custodial supplies. We had 100 different, I guess it's 100 different chemicals or different types of things being used, and we moved that to 50, again, which is another streamlining of things that we were concerned with. In the area of HR and finance, there was a streamlining of benefits administration. Again, an attempt to look at the ethical stewardship that we need to demonstrate. Those are just a few of the things. The report is long, and there were obviously gaps in terms of the results and reporting that we were able to do. But I want to thank the staff across the system for responding in the challenging learning environment, and I know that we will update trustees also on some of the things that have taken place over the past year. And I think we have another slide. Okay, so I wanted to, and I don't even know if I do have a copy of it, changed here. These are some of the things that I don't know if trustees can see this as well, but I wanted to provide a little bit. That was last year's operational plan, and now I just want to move quickly to some of the things because I know you'd want some updates about our numbers and where we're at. And I'm going to say that this is somewhat tentative because we're trying to get numbers all together, and that's not as easy to do when all these virtual school things are being. But for a good idea of where we're at, our total students are 36,695 students. When we look at our elementary cohort, in person we have 16,185 students in that in-person learning. In the area of virtual learning, we have 5,653 students, and in the area of paper packages, 3,074. So you can see that we have a lot going on at the elementary panel in 3 different areas. In secondary, in-class learners are 8,932, and in the virtual area, there's 2,851. Again, these numbers hold to them. These were the numbers we pulled off today. They could be slightly changing, but I think those are where we're at. So with respect to staffing, you might want to know how many teachers we have in the system. We have in the virtual schools. Now think about trying to reorganize a system and have this many teachers in it. So we have 373 elementary teachers now teaching from a virtual lens, and 157 teachers. So kudos to all the staffing and to Superintendent Mills, Superintendent Houston, who did a lot of work to reconfigure all of this. And then, of course, we have support staff that are working also in the virtual learning. Those would be educational assistants and DSWs who would be supporting students as well. Some of the other things we had, I know that Superintendent Howard was involved in development of the elementary pacing guides, which would help with the planning so that there's people are staying together in some of the work, and so that there's a developmental conceptual understanding, and that's been created with staff and shared with staff, so to help them in the learning. Remember, for a lot of our elementary teachers, this is somewhat new in terms of the development of virtual learning. There's elementary virtual homework program is currently being developed and working at that. Right now, I think there is a secondary virtual orientation video that was created, and also we have homework advisors, and I know Superintendent Canty's been working on this, so that that there's homework help in particular subject disciplines where they can connect to see if there's any concerns they have in a whole bunch of different areas. I think there's about 6 or 7 different areas, the arts and social studies, and there's certain areas that they're divided into, and those would be available for both of our cohorts in secondary. And then you'll see the number of technology requests that we had for students. And remember, we already had probably 3,600 devices out at this point. And now we've added another 1,820 students have received devices. Staff, about 2,480 students, staff have received devices. Again, we've provided those to all teachers. And we've provided internet to 111 families where there was need. You'll also see the information here about the number of engagements. I won't read all that off. The number of press releases and school messenger information that has been sent out. You'll see a list of some of the videos that we have posted on the website, and things around reopening schools. I think I sent some of the trustees, or all of you, the Back to School with Bella, some of the videos we've been doing to encourage students in the safety as they return to school. And again, we thank our community partners. The Windsor Essex Health Unit has been outstanding in responding very quickly to everything that we've asked, and Goodfellows have been very generous with us, and the Learning Disabilities Association we've worked closely with. And then we're also continuing with the breakfast and snack programs. I think I saw on Twitter today a number of things that are happening in schools to be able to ensure nutrition in our school buildings. The next page has a little bit about, if you get a chance, and some of you maybe had a chance to go in the buildings or certainly have seen pictures of it, I just want to give a big shout out to our custodial maintenance and skilled trade staff, because they have arranged to have 50,000 floor stickers. They have there's 2,800 maximum occupancy sign installed. If you even walk around here, there's posters everywhere. There's 1,950 mounted hand sanitizing stations that have been installed. There's 4,577 posters around the system promoting hand washing and physical distancing. There's 140 water bottle refilling stations that have been put in. And look at all the number of teaching spaces, if you look up there, that had to be reconfigured, and office areas. And if you go look at the school, how it's been reconfigured, or even our offices here, it's really quite impressive how that happened over a summer. We had 191 barriers constructed and installed by our awesome carpenters. We had 33 storage bins rented for excess furniture. As you'll see, a lot of our furniture is gone out of our buildings to make sure that there's social distancing, and also that the surfaces, for example, cloth chairs, are removed. There's 1,240 sinks for hand washing stations that are now active in the system, and there's 1,054 washrooms with multiple sinks. And so I just want to thank all the facilities maintenance and trades staff for all their work in getting prepared for the school year. So thank you very much. That is the operation update on the operational plan from last year, and I'd be happy to or the senior team would be happy to answer any questions. And it also provides you a little bit update around where we are with some of the changes and things that were happening at the beginning of this school year. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Trustee Halberstadt?
Yes, Madam Director. What about plexiglass? How much have you spent on that? Do you have a figure?
I don't have that off the top of my head, Trustee Halberstadt, but I might look to Superintendent Armstrong because we did speak about that, I think, and I think you've probably a better idea than I do.
So we constructed those internally using our awesome carpenters because they are awesome. We spent a total of $10,000 on materials and another $28,000 in labor. So those 191 barriers cost us approximately $38,000. They are all built to size. They are customized, and the turnaround was really quick, and they look great.
So where are they located for the most part?
You would find them in just about every building across the board. They are in schools, for example, in offices. They are throughout the finance, the employment assessment centers, the newcomers. They're across every building where we can't physically provide 6 feet of distancing for staff.
Just one final question to the director. Do you know now what the average class size is in our elementary?
Thank you for that question, Trustee Halberstadt. I had a feeling that you might ask me that. Superintendent Mills, we chatted today about that, and I know that you had numbers for primary, numbers for, I wrote them down, but I don't know where they are, and I know you will have them. But we have pretty good class sizes. Again, there's shifts that have happened over the last little while, but the class sizes are looking good. So if you could provide an idea on primary and junior intermediate.
Sure. So what we tried to do is add teachers back to the system to lower our class size. That was one of the priorities that we had set out. So when we look at our average junior intermediate class size, we are approximately 23 and a half students, 23.5 students in our junior intermediate class. Our primary is 19.5, and our FDK classes are approximately 20, just over 20.
Trustee Hatfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the operational plan, I just want to say thank you so much. And even though our attempt this year to maybe renew our strategic priorities fell through because of COVID, I still think that what we had developed a number of years ago are still very helpful in guiding the work of the board. And I see those priorities popping up all the time, whether it's the audit committee or the boardroom or reports that we get, and I just still think that it does a good job in guiding us and determining how well we're doing as a board. So thank you for that report. I do have some questions about the COVID update. I just wondered, because all this virtual school and staffing is all new to us, I wondered how the staffing process went for that. Like how did we put teachers into those positions?
Well, I know Superintendent Mills and Superintendent Housen spent a lot of time doing this. Certainly there were people who had medical issues, and of course they were accommodated through the virtual school. And then I believe there was some self-selection for teachers so that they were put in there. It's a huge process to be able to move that many students and then the teachers to match them, especially like in secondary with subject discipline or with certain qualifications in elementary. It was really a huge challenge. So there was a lot of late nights, there was a lot of fast work, there was a lot of communication, but with schools and whatever. So if there's more specifics you want, I would look to them. But there was a lot that occurred quickly. There were many weekend pieces to the work. So it was complicated and quite amazing that people were able to shift that quickly. And as you can see across the province, people are struggling with getting virtual schools up and running because of the movement. And so I'm really pleased, despite a few, data issues, we really have done a good job of quickly moving staff.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm sure it was a huge piece of work, and I did ask that question because I know it hasn't been that easy across the province. But there's also, I'm reading the fine print here. There's a new position here called homework advisors. Are those teachers? Like, how does that work?
Superintendent Candy, can you speak to that for us? Because I know it's your piece that you've been working on.
Absolutely. So we had some teachers reassigned by Superintendent Houston, and one of the concerns that we've heard from our schools, I was in Walkerville the other day, and a couple of the teachers were saying the concern is the asynchronous time that students are home when their teachers are teaching the other cohort. And are the students able to do that work, and can they be supported? So as the director said, we have teachers in English, math, science, social science, art, French, and tech. So basically across the curriculum where they can email in and get a direct response from our teachers and get support on the work that they have at home. So it's a really great program that we started. They're homework advisors. Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Trustee Higginson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I want to, I know we started off this meeting by thanking everybody here in this room, and I thank you, and I want to thank everybody across the system. So I have 3 children in this system. I have 1 in secondary and 2 in elementary. And everything that I read about and heard about tonight has gratefully touched our family and the way that we do school. And there was a lot of anxiety going into the school year. Of course, a lot of anxiety around things we didn't know or how things would go. And seeing this and then seeing it operating on the ground, it is a massive undertaking that is incomprehensible, even while we have data like this and graphics like this and meetings like this. When you see the ability for it to touch people in the way that they go about their lives and the way that it's impacted me as a parent and my children as students, I am deeply grateful, and I'm proud to be part of this board. So thank you very much to everybody. I'm looking at, when I looked at this operational plan from 1920 and I saw all these actual outcomes, and it was sad to me because there's a ton of work that just, kind of got stopped in the middle, and a ton of effort that was put into it that just kind of got stopped in the middle. But I'm grateful to see everything that's talked about when we say there'll be a focus on this in the coming years. And I know that we're going to shift a little in the way that we refocus some of those initiatives. One of those places that and you touched on a few of these that I was super impressed with were the translation of documents. So we have, in our expected outcomes, this is on page 25, in our expected outcomes, we wanted to create 4 translated documents into Spanish, Chinese, French, and Arabic. And then you look at this huge list of things that were translated. And through our work at GECPIC, that was one of the major identifiers that existed before COVID that we were trying to get to, and the things that we were trying to do. And so while there have been huge challenges with COVID, there's also been massive wins, and I want to thank everybody for their efforts in that. Despite everything, all the other additional work that you had, these things were exceptional. So thank you. They all kind of wrap around the one question that I had, which is we have this Information Technology Services Demand Plan on page 10. I'm wondering 2 kind of big pieces of that. Has that mandate changed or altered? And at what point do we consider that IT Services Demand Plan to be deeply informative to the rest of the strategic plan that we have going forward? to that one.
Superintendent Mills, can you answer that? I know that you're probably part of the development of that the demand plan, but maybe you can speak to a bit to that, or?
Sure, I can speak a bit to that. Our IT manager, Taib Farouk, was instrumental in doing that, and he's not here with us tonight, and he would be able to speak to it further. I know the work that we're doing right now is a lot different than what we had planned on doing. I think our operational plan for last year happened in about 3 weeks back in March. So many of the items that were planned out for the year happened for this upcoming year were done in a very, very short period of time. We continue to adjust those plans, the demand plan, as needs arise. I'm not sure if I'm really answering your question articulately, and if there's any clarification, I can follow up with you afterwards.
Thank you. I realize it was a very complicated question, but I'm just kind of looking forward into realizing what we have here, and some of the ways that those needs may change as October rolls around and some of the virtual schools change, and through our quad-mastered secondary schools, how some of those needs change. The ability to be fluid with that, with an IT services demand plan and with our operational plan is going to be fluid and agile is going to be the way that we achieve success. And I'm quite impressed with what I've been able to see happen on the ground. So thank you.
Trustee Sipkar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for the enormous amount of work that you're doing as well. I had a question more on, I guess, on the curriculum side of things. I'm wondering, there was the announcement of the new math curriculum, and I'm just wondering, I didn't really see it factor in to the operational plan. That was one part of it, and also wondered about the COVID recovery plan that the board passed. And I know that we received an update about that in July, but I just wondered if those two things are kind of in the background of this document, or if they're functioning front and center as, I don't know if that like guiding kind of documents. And I looked through you to Superintendent Howitt.
Sure, I can just respond to that a bit, Trustee Sipkar. The math curriculum was introduced really very recently, so it wouldn't be reflected in the past document, but certainly, Superintendent Howitt, there has certainly been work done in that area, so if you want to speak to that. But it really is a very new phenomenon, which you'll see more in the operational plan coming forward. And further, the COVID recovery plan that we had talked about in the past, we were going to be bringing that back, I know, later in the fall, probably at the end of October, at the next meeting. That was our chance. And we're going to see how those two intersect and link, which is a bit of a challenge too. So we're looking at that, and I know Trustee Cook had asked that question before, and we looked to October. So, but Superintendent, you want to add about the map?
The only thing I would add is for the new curriculum that all elementary staff have had training in the initial days of this school year, and more training is to come.
Thank you for that. And I guess my question is, knowing that this expires this year, this our strategic priorities, and obviously this is the operational plan from that, I guess the question is, are we going to see that new curriculum, see these new things factor in? And is that something that, as a new trustee, is that something that we provide input into as we develop our strategic priorities for, I'm assuming we have to, in the next 8 months?
If I understand your question, Trustee Sipkar, your question is, are we looking at a new strategic plan? Is that what you're saying? Or?
Right, it's more, well, I appreciated Trustee Hatfield's comment about how our, our goals from 5 years ago are, still holding true for us. There was a number of things that came up that are new, right? Obviously, just being in COVID, but also even the new math curriculum announcement, those types of things. And so I just wonder how those things factor in when we know that we're going to have to update this whole plan. Is that kind of clear? It's kind of a question of how we proceed more than what we proceed with, I guess.
I think there's somewhat two different things. The math curriculum is a ministry-mandated curriculum, and it is incumbent upon us to do that, to provide that kind of thing. So it could fall under new strategic directions, and I think that we had a plan for working on a new strategic plan, and I certainly hope we continue with that. But I think there are many things that we are mandated to do that would be part of an expectation in the curriculum, and there may be other things that the board would have focus on, and so I think those two things could intersect, but that would be through a strategic planning exercise. But the operational plan of the board is usually how staff actualizes and brings alive the strategic plan.
So I was going to comment that we were planning to do a strategic plan update prior to COVID-19, and certainly how we tie in our vision for math learning may be a strategic priority for us. It was when we came up with the math task force, so it's a valid question, and I think the answer is yes. Yeah. Trustee Cheen.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to show my appreciation to the senior administration and all the administration and the staffs here, for their excellent work. As you know that I'm the most critics in this board, and previously because of the 1 day single course plan, 1 week single course, I strongly against it, and somebody questioned that I'm even out of my responsibility. But I'm glad that later the board changed that, but I kind of worried that they may not have enough time to arrange that because of the late change. But to my surprise, that they arrange it much better and faster than other boards. So I'm kind of how to say that, touched by that. So I'm very straightforward. Whatever I think is bad, I speak it out. Whatever I think is good, I speak it out. So I hope the senior administration won't misunderstood me. And I want to, from my heart, to appreciate your hard work and good job. And as for the plan, I have several questions. The first is that on page 289, I appreciate that you mentioned about the responding to racist COVID statements, and especially there is one example, specific examples regarding Chinese. Because I heard that COVID-19 started in China and it's spread by Chinese people. And the response speak up is the 2019 novel coronavirus stated in Wuhan, China. This is just geography. I wonder if you can change this kind of statement. This is questionable. I don't think it's come from, now more and more evidence say that it's come earlier than whatever happened in China in the beginning of this year. So I wonder if we respond this way, we will make it more, kind of misunderstood. You know what I mean? So I wonder if we can change this statement.
I don't think that the director specifically knows, so maybe we could.
It's in the documents. 289.
Dr. Pike.
Thank you. This exact example is in the international plan. That was the previous agenda item.
Oh.
So it is in there. However, to saying that, thank you for that information. We'll take that back.
Yeah, I
This
appreciate
information from our community partners to do with health.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? If not, I'd like to move on to the OPSWA report.
I have a question, Burgess.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll say with my colleagues, thank you so much for this operational plan. It's extraordinary considering all the curveballs that we've been thrown, that we've had such little gap between the expected outcomes and the actual outcomes. I applaud absolutely everybody who had a hand in that. My question specifically is on, I guess, 43 of the operational plan, 336 handwritten. And it has to do with increasing share of community notices exclusively through EDSB. And the report states that there were 22,741 members. I mean, logistically, that's gigantic, right? Anytime you have 22,741, and I would imagine possibly even more now. I'd like a status on EDSB. The expected outcome was, of course, that, by having the one focus, the one portal, the one area where we could, encourage parents and students and, guardians to go to, and staff. When it doesn't work perfectly, we've got all our eggs in that one basket. And we had a test of that. We had a severe test of that at a very crucial time that added to employee, parent, guardian, student stress and anxiety. And it could have been for a smoother reopening. I know we worked very closely with EDSB, but I only heard that sort of third hand. So I wonder if you could give us an update from this statement of the actual outcomes and how we're working with EDSB, what our relationship is, what our guarantees, warranties, how close that alignment is, because when EDSB isn't there, things go terribly wrong. Thank you.
Trustee Burgess, it's through the chair, it's Director Kelly. I just want to make sure that people understand that really the system challenges that we had in the last little while really were kind of a bit of a storm between a new student information system moving into the virtual school. It really wasn't just an EDSB thing. As you know, we've been working on a very large, complex project in the student information system. If anyone has been involved in any kind of change of an information system in any organization, it's a lot of work. So
it's just a point of order. Is that the Aspen?
Yes, that's correct. That's correct.
Okay. So that was my second question for clarification.
Okay,
Thank you.
Yeah. The project's been in the works for over a year. And it's a very big job, and it involves everyone across the board. So the project was on track, and then, of course, there were a number of things, COVID. Then we had something happen at, at the end of July. Our ministry is telling us to redo things in terms of the models. So all of this kind of made up for a challenging start. But I want to be clear that the EDSB really wasn't the issue. We had actually shut down EDSB because of some of the communication issues, I suppose, between what was happening in Aspen and whether what we put out in EDSB would be the accurate information. So it was really an issue of the data transfer. So I wouldn't want to say EDSB was the problem. It was the transfer of the information between our student information system over to EDSB that didn't come out as accurate as we had planned. So we do have a good relationship with EDSB. I know we have had some issues, but I just want to be clear that it really was a number of factors coming together that we were actually, as a board, stopped EDSB because the information that was going to it wouldn't have been accurate and would have created more problems. And then we communicated out late, I recognize, but I just want to understand there were a whole bunch of factors here that were coming together that resulted in this. And Superintendent Mills, if I'm wrong in that, you can correct me, but I think that would describe kind of what happened.
Madame Leboeuf.
The point of the community notices is the actual flyers that we receive from our community partners and groups that we share with our families. Instead of giving out paper copies, we post them in EDSB instead of having to distribute paper copies. So it's more in line with our Eco Schools program as well.
Thank you. Trustee Burgess, do you have a supplementary?
I didn't hear any of that, but I'll check the feed, once I can. But my question was actually, the next one was about Aspen. And I'm wondering if, because thank you so much for the explanation. That eases my mind. I would have loved to have known that while it was happening, so that it was two things were interacting and that people had to lessen the expectation that it's going to be resolved quickly, because it is that kind of collision of Aspen and EDSB and both things, not syncing. But as far as the Aspen goes, how is that going? Because I thought I saw it in the operational plan, when our meeting was supposed to be last week, and then when I re-looked at the thing, I couldn't find it again. So Aspen is going well, the transition?
We've had some challenges with Aspen, there's no doubt about that. When you move a student information system, that's huge. All the data that we would have across the system and the registration, all that information is challenging. We did have a staff of Aspen people here, quite a large staff actually here at the board office working. There were some glitches. When you try to also move 12,000 students to a virtual school, and the complexities of that, it poses issues. There have been some bumps for sure, and you put that in a COVID context. You put that in a retimetabling of a lot of things. Yeah, we've had some challenges. We've worked closely with them. We've still got things to work out, but we had a rather outdated student information system. To be fair, we had probably the only board in Ontario to have the particular system, and it worked well for us. But there was certainly a need to move forward, and we did. And it's good. Other boards had to do the same. So the timing wasn't perfect for us, but we're working closely with Aspen to resolve issues.
Okay, Trustee Sibcar, you have a OPSWA report?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I will try to keep it brief, although we're not as late as we normally are. And what I'll say is our last meeting for our OPSWA meeting, Board of Directors meeting, was on July 29th. And that was largely an in-camera meeting just focused on labor updates and the reopening plan. So because things have changed so significantly since that point, our Board of Directors meeting is actually this upcoming weekend, as well as our AGM. And I say that because a lot of the discussion will certainly center around how reopening went. For example, there's one item on the agenda with respect to a learning project that happened with a research project, with Wilfrid Laurier University graduate students about trying to understand how boards adapted to the remote learning environment. And one of the there's a report on the findings, and I found that our board, for example, is I think very consistent with those findings. And so I think in saying that and pointing to just the one item, I think that a lot of boards are experiencing similar challenges. And I think at our meeting on the weekend, we'll both discuss how we bring those challenges forward to the ministry, but also at the AGM be electing new representatives as well, or the same. But there's a number of people who are running for different positions this year. So Trustee Burgess, I know she's on the line. She's our voting delegate. And she's also running for Western president. And there's also 4 policy resolutions that will be on the floor as well. Of note, one that I think is likely will pass, but it's worth noting, is the anti-racism and advocacy plan that directs both resources and advocacy towards the Ministry of Education. And I think that would be a really excellent initiative for OPSWA to take on, and also support boards in their direction and endeavors as well. And so with all that, I'll take any questions or comments, or if Trustee Burgess wants to jump in to say anything else, as she has been on one of the committees as well throughout the summer that have been meeting.
Are there any questions? Trustee Burgess, did you have anything to add?
No, just that I don't partake in the directors' meetings, but I can say that I don't think we've, on the policy development work team, and the very quick turnarounds and input that we needed on very fast takes on legislation and policies before Queen's Park stopped, and even since. I don't think we've ever worked this hard over the summer. So thanks to all my colleagues on policy development and education program, because there was a lot of work, and everybody went above and beyond.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to the chair's report. So I'm just going to say it's September, and it's a school year like no other. Fear and anxiety. I've never heard it at a meeting as much as I have tonight. And we haven't got past the fear, and we haven't got past the anxiety yet. But collectively, I'm confident we will. I have to say that I don't think anybody that's worked in the education sector has ever faced the challenges that were faced this year. We are faced with a ministry providing plans or approvals for plans and withdrawing approvals and then putting in new approvals at the very last minute. We were challenged with providing multiple platforms for delivery. So essentially the work of 3 different boards, an online board, an online education stream, the face-to-face stream, and of course the delivery package stream. And then just throw in a technological failure, because as anybody who's ever attended a school board meeting knows, that the slideshows always work pre-meeting. And of course, like anything else, when you need to count on technology the most, it fails you. I also understand that you must feel like you've been pulled in every single direction. I don't know if it was Superintendent Canty that asked me if I felt like Gumby at one point, but it may have, and I certainly felt like Gumby over this last 30 days, because for every call that we got saying everybody should be wearing masks in schools, there was parents that would say nobody should be wearing masks in schools. For everybody that said students should be only online, there was parents that said every student should be in classes. For when we had the various plans for 1 class or 2 class or 3 classes, there was people that liked 1 and didn't like 1, liked 2 and didn't like 2, liked 3 and didn't like 3. When we voted in favor of spending 1% of our reserves for pandemic planning, I had people call me and say, how dare you spend your reserve funds? And then when we turned down spending 2%, it was, how dare you turn down spending 2%? So, do I feel like Gumby? Yes. So, I just want to say to the director, the superintendents, the administrators, the educators, the employees, I'm going to tell a little story. I was at Home Hardware in LaSalle on a Saturday afternoon, and I saw one of our board vans in the parking lot, and I approached the employee that was there, and I introduced myself, and he said, oh man, you have to know how much work we're putting into the schools. And I'm like, given that you're in the hardware on a Saturday afternoon getting supplies, I believe you. And so kudos to all the employees, no matter what your role is in this organization. I want to thank the unions for their efforts, the parents, the students, everybody. We entered whitewater when we pushed off this September. If we were rafting, we entered the white water immediately, and it was rough, and we got tossed about a little bit, but there's smooth waters in front of us, I hope. But we also have to be aware that there could be white waters in front of us as well. But I will say this, there are other boards that are circling around in that white water and haven't got as far as we have. The final thing I wanted to say is I wanted to personally thank Dr. Ahmed on behalf of the board for the fact that he took his time to come to our online Zoom meetings and answer the questions that we had and make things clear for us. And if I have the consent of the board, I'd like to draft a letter of thanks to him on behalf of the trustees, just to thank Dr. Ahmed for his support and guidance in our preparations. So do I have consent of the board for that? Is there anybody opposed? With that, we'll move on. Thank you. With that, we'll move on to trustee question period. Do we have questions? Trustee Cheen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question that based on the great possibility of the breakout of the campus coronavirus, I wonder if we have any plan to prepare if a breakout happened in a school, or not a breakout, just for example, a cohort in one classroom happened, and those students are quarantined for at least 14 days. Do we have any compensate plans for them to continue studying online? I got some answer, but I want to clarify, and I would like to have a detailed plan to handle that, because this is the next stage. Thank you.
Through the chair, Trustee Chin, yes, we do, and Superintendent Pike can speak to that because of some recent experience, and yes, we do have a plan, and we do continue the learning, but you might want to give some specifics to that.
Thank you. Yes, we did have not an outbreak, but one confirmed case over the weekend, which we got to test our model to make sure that it worked in partnership with the Windsor-Essex County Health Unit. And I'm very pleased to say it did work, and it worked very well for a Sunday afternoon. And from that, we've taken our learnings, and we are actually revising the plan to tweak it to make sure that we've captured the things that we could have done better, or the things that we needed just to add into the plan. So that part is done. When you talk about students and students getting their work, yes, they will continue to work. So if they have been medically excluded from school from the medical officer of health, and that's one single student, then they will still be connected to their classroom teacher and be provided work. If it is a full cohort that is out, including the teacher, they will be pivoting on a dime to go right to a virtual learning experience just for the time of the 14 days self-isolation. So yes, we have extensive plans, and very pleased to report that all the planning that we did over the summer worked well, and we're ready.
Questions? Trustee Sipkar?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a question about the Active Transportation Committee. I did note it was on our operational plan, but I thought it could fit here too. We had a meeting planned for March, and obviously got canceled because of COVID, and I just was wondering, through you to Superintendent Allender, if there have been plans to start the committee back up.
So the answer is yes. What happened is just late last week, the City School Liaison Committee that has active transportation involved with it, they had their first meeting for a long time as well. And Mark Winterton chairs that committee. Myself, Superintendent Armstrong, and Juliana Hinchliffe are on that committee as well. And so the city also does now have Jeff Hagan, who oversees the active transportation implementation for the city. So I was on the phone with him yesterday, and we were talking. He's willing to join our committee. And as we're speaking, Mrs. Brashhammer, my Min assistant, has been looking for dates to get the committee back together.
Trustee Halberstadt?
Yes, as far as getting committees back together, I have a similar question with regard to the anti-bullying committee that we started, and there was a pause. We were going along well, and rightly so, we had to pause it. But I've been keeping track of the Hamilton Wentworth study that they've done. They've done an extensive study, and apparently they're going to have their final draft in December. At least that's what I was reading the other day. So I'm wondering if there's any plans to get our little committee back together.
Thank you. Yes, there is plans. Right now, we rely a lot on our administrators to be part of the committee, and due to their pressing nature of their role right now, we thought that we could see if it would settle down after Thanksgiving, that we'd be able to start pulling the committee back together again.
Questions? Trustee Hatfield?
Thank you. I just wonder if the director could remind me if we settled on a second date in October, if parents and students want to make a change in their learning cohort. I can't remember where that landed.
Yes, we did. It's going to be challenging for us, and so we did look at, I think, information requests to change going out in that October 26th timeframe for a November 9th change. I do caution that we'll do our best to accommodate all changes, but it is really a lot of work to reconfigure things. But yes, there was a plan to do that, and so that was our plan at this point. But again, when you see how much change has to occur, it's a lot of work. So if there's a need for change, I'm hoping people are settling into the learning model that they have selected, and yes, that would be the time frame.
Any other questions? Trustees on the phone?
Trustee Burgess.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to my colleagues before, because some of my question has somewhat been answered, but it's an elaboration. So thank you for confirming October 26th is the timeline for the deadline for changing platforms. What I have heard in the last couple of weeks, the gap that I see that is remaining that is very frustrating to parents are those who have made a selection. It was a careful selection. It was after looking at all the models and changing their minds and changing to see the new models, whatever they were, however they were, and finally landing somewhere and hoping that it would work. And they chose either a virtual school or the paper offline or in-person in classroom. And although, of course, we hope, as I heard the director say, that they settle in, it's a bit like tasting licorice ice cream. Some people love it, and some people think, what is this? This doesn't suit me. So while they had hoped that they'd made the right choice, there are many parents and guardians and students who are finding it a bad fit. And a bad fit maybe because it doesn't meet their expectations, or maybe they have unrealistic expectations, but at any rate, they find it a bad fit. So whether they're going from any one of those platforms, the virtual, the paper, the in-person, and they want to move to another, they can't until October. The gap that I find it now is, particularly now that we have had active cases, and anyone who, any part of a cohort, if a cohort involves busing, et cetera, whatever, is that quarantine period and that easy pivot. Now, what I heard, and I'm hoping I heard right, so because I want to get the question right, because I can't hear everything, by the way. What I think I heard from Superintendent Pike is that if it's a whole cohort with the teacher, then the whole cohort with the teacher pivots to an online. So I want to make sure that it's confirmed that it's the same teacher that pivots with that same cohort if the entire cohort moves within that 14-day of quarantining. But what I want to ask is, if it's not that, if because of what platform you're in and you're quarantined, how do we assign, is there a place to park, those who are sidelined, either by being quarantined or they're off ill or they, whatever the reason is? Is there a way to ensure some level of continuity of the standard of support that they have when they find themselves out of that loop? So they can't do, they want to move to another thing because they're unhappy before October 26th, or it's involuntary because they've been quarantined. Why can't they instantly go to, for example, if they're in-person and they're quarantined, why can't they instantly go to an online if it isn't a whole cohort?
Thank you. I'll start off the question. So one of your questions was, if it was the same cohort, will the teacher be the same if they pivot together as a cohort? The answer is yes, providing the teacher is not actively ill. If they are actively ill during self-isolation, then there will be an occasional teacher that will provide the instruction as we go through that. As for your other question, which was to do with can't they just go to a different mode of instruction if there has been a 14-day self-isolation? It's all to do with timetables. We'll talk about secondary. It's all to do with timetables, and it's to do with staffing, and it's to do with the actual cohort that's been already established. It's not as easy as it sounds, and many people
I don't think it sounds easy. Yeah.
on the phone, they would ask, isn't it just as simple? It's not just simple, because you have to match in secondary the course that the students are taking with the course that's being offered at that particular time in the virtual school.
Thank you.
Okay, just clarification, Mr. Chair. I don't want ever to leave anybody the idea that I think any of this is simple. I know it's very complicated, but these questions are the largest questions I'm getting because the anticipation of either further outbreaks or further cases, et cetera, is that, well, if I don't want to go to class, if I don't want to do that, if I want to choose something else because of a familiar contact with that cohort, there's no option for that. And I was just wondering how difficult. I know it's difficult, but I anticipate a bit of a quagmire between October 6th and November 9th. And I believe that if other things come up, it's going to be difficult. I'm just wondering if we're hiring more people or assigning more people to help with those really difficult transitions. I just think they're going to require extra stewardship. Thank you.
Trustee Burgess, as Director Kelly, we are sticking to those dates. The opportunity to pivot into another mode, it's very complicated, and so we're going to have to stick with those modes until those dates. Again, many boards are going to find it. In fact, I spoke to 2 directors today who think that they don't even think they can do that because it is very complicated to be able to move the staffing, to follow collective agreements, to keep the cohorts together, to not move kids into some situation where they're with different students. Like it's a very complex thing, so we're working very hard to do it at points that make sense. And even at that point, it will be challenging. I know Superintendent Mills and I talked today, the amount of precision and precise work that has to happen to make sure everything's in check is very, we have to be health and safety conscious too. So we just can't be moving students easily into classes and out as well.
Thank you. Student trustees, any questions? No? Anybody else online?
Trustee Leclerc, this is Trustee Olmstead. I do have a question.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering if anyone could provide an update for some of our specialized or experiential learning programs like OYAP or co-op or special high skills major. Are those programs running at their normal capacity due to COVID restrictions? And as well, has there been any update to the IB program from the IB world? At our last meeting, I did ask for clarification, and unfortunately, there hadn't been a lot of communication. So I was just wondering if there could be some sort of an update for both elementary and secondary programs.
Superintendent Canty.
Yes, thank you, Trustee Sartori. So in terms of OYAP and SHISM, we are moving ahead with those programs. We have had some trouble finding placements. However, we're working actively to find placements for students. In terms of the IB program, we were able to, there's been nothing from IB World, unfortunately, except for that the testing will go on as scheduled at the regular time. So we've had to make some changes in terms of timetabling in our IB schools. And we've worked with the union very, very productively to make sure that we're able to provide the IB programming for students who are virtual to continue with them in the IB program. So things are moving along well. There's always going to be glitches, especially as Director Kelly said, when we move to that second quadmester, there may be some issues in terms of how we make that work. But we have great staff working on it, and all programs are up and running.
Trustee Olmstead, do you have supplementary?
I do. I was just wondering for those students who are in IB or who were in IB and did virtually and opted out of IB, will they have the opportunity to go back into IB in the elementary up until grade 10, or will that opportunity have passed now that they're virtual learners?
Thank you again for the question, and we're really happy to say that those students will be able to get back into IB when they go back from elementary through to grade 10, when they go back to their regular school. Hopefully, eventually, they will be able to re-enter the IB program.
Okay, thanks so much for that clarification.
Okay, I think we've, Trustee Higginson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is kind of along the lines of what Trustee Burgess was talking about, and I have just thinking about it in terms of my high schooler, the changes at the end of each quadmester leave me with chills, trying to figure out how at the end of an exam period to change over an entire cohort or several cohorts of students into a different learning model. Leaves me with chills thinking about it. My question is around professional development for staff. I know in the operational report there was a reference to, and I liked it before, and I'm surprised I never asked about it before, but there's some reference to a repository of lesson plans that are available to educators. And I'm wondering if there's continuous additions to that as we move forward into a digital environment, and wondering about that agility if we all have to suddenly go back online, what the kind of availability is for professional development, both active professional development and then those kind of more passive pieces that are being built as a repository for staff to be able to pull from if we all had to suddenly shift into an online environment if that were to happen.
Thank you for the question. What you're referring to in the repository of lesson plans was based on the plan last year when it came to the writing initiative, and I believe around character development as well. Those didn't come to fruition because of job stoppage and so on and COVID. We are doing things right now because of the reentry plan and trying to support our educators. Madam Director did already talk about the pacing guides, and the reason those were instilled is generally we don't tell teachers what to teach at what time of the year. But because of the possibilities of all these shifts, we wanted to ensure that the students had access to all of the curriculum. So regardless of what model they were in, if they shifted, those expectations were covered during that time period. So those have been developed so far. That's why the pacing guides were put in place. So it's actually, they're very, very well done, and I think helpful to teachers regardless of the model that they're teaching in. And they've been done for all content areas. And that's for elementary, because in secondary they teach a comprehensive course, right? Also being developed, and actually I should be able to release them tomorrow, and they've been built into Brightspace, is examples of integrated units of study, so that multiple curriculum areas are being touched upon while teachers have time with students in a virtual world. So like right now, the time for students in a virtual world is 225 minutes. Well, how do you cover all of the curriculum within that time frame in an efficient and effective way? And it actually aligns to high quality teaching because it's cross-curricular. So those are presently being developed, examples by grade level. And professional development is being provided, as well as how to use platforms. And that's going to continue to grow as we continue to evolve and support the new normal. I hope that's helpful.
It is. Thank you very much.
Okay, before we go on, I have one question. My question relates to the Transportation Consortium. I had, if not 100 calls, 75 calls of parents that were angry with the Transportation Consortium because their child was deemed to be a walker this year, and they were previously not walkers. So my question is two parts. One is, how did the walking distance change, if any, and how many students that previously were provided transportation were put into a situation where they had to walk? So I actually had my last one, which I didn't share with Ms. Armstrong, was a parent whose child had to walk from the 300 block of Maple to Sandwich Secondary on Malden Road. So the 300 block is 3 short blocks from Front Road in LaSalle, and they would have to walk to Sandwich. It seems an inordinate long walk for a student. Anyways, that's my question.
Thank you for the question, and I do appreciate the frustrations. I've gotten just as many calls, so I do appreciate that. It's a transportation consortium policy, not GECDSB policy to start with. So all of the coterminous boards that were part of the consortium had the same challenges, where the Transportation Consortium did look at hazards, what they deemed as a hazard, which made children that were in the walk zone eligible for transportation, and they assessed to see if those hazards had been adequately addressed for purposes of student transportation. So so the walk zone did not change. For the first part of your question, it did not change. In terms of students at our board, there were a total of 467 that lost the transportation, of which 100 of them are currently remote learners. So 367 were impacted across a number of schools. Sandwich West, Sandwich Secondary, Bell River, and Herman Herman Elementary were the schools that had the higher proportionate number of individuals that lost their transportation. Just to put in perspective, if West had not made those changes, they would have had to have canceled routes. They don't have enough drivers. It's very challenging right now, and drivers are quitting, resigning, retiring, and so they take a look at a number of factors. And in a lot of instances, was a sidewalk installed? Are there traffic lights now at intersections? Those are some of the factors that West will look at when they assess those hazards.
So I guess as a supplementary, one of the issues that I encountered was Malden Road in the area of Sprucewood, between Stewart and Sprucewood, and as far back as Ream, where there's a marked crossing that nobody follows. They need to put a light up there. Unfortunately, that is a county road, so the town can't do anything about it. Anyways, long story short is an SK was being asked to walk up from Stewart down Malden Road and was instructed to cross at Sprucewood on their way to Sandwich West Public School. That student would have been expected to walk on the west shoulder of Malden Road, which is not a sidewalk. It's not paved, it's a soft shoulder. And during the winter time, that shoulder is completely covered in snow and not traversable by an adult. And yet we're asking a student in SK to traverse this. It's, in my opinion, some of the decisions were reprehensible, and I just want to make sure that was on record. I'm not saying you as the person on the consortium, but I think when those issues are raised, I think 350 kids being displaced from riding the bus in the county is simply not acceptable.
Sorry, if I can just provide some additional follow-up. So for families that feel that they don't agree with that decision, there is an opportunity for them to appeal that decision, and it does go to the Board of Directors for the Transportation Consortium, so that they can certainly do that. I appreciate the challenges. I know that it is tough. And like I said, we're struggling. The Transportation Consortium is struggling right now just to keep existing routes going right now. So I appreciate it. It is difficult.
Thank you. And like I said, it's not, I understand it's not you, it's the consortium. And anyway, notices of motion. Are there any notices of motion? Announcements. Trustee Hatfield.
Thank you. I just want to announce that the Hatfields now have all 6 of their grandkids enrolled in our school board. They're all GECDSB proud. So the 2 youngest are in JK, and the oldest has just started grade 5. So I've got the whole clan in there now, and I'm very proud that they're all going to be educated through our school system. Thank you.
Trustee Higginson.
Just a quick reminder to everybody that September 30th, whether you are studying in class or online or packet learners, September 30th is Orange Shirt Day. And so we can wear orange shirts to support our Indigenous community and represent that every child matters. So if you can spread that around, student trustees, I'm seeing you nodding, that's good. If you can spread that around as part of your Instagram, that would be really great.
Trustee Cheen.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to mention that the safety again, and I heard some parents said that the students with masks, when they are out of school, in front of the building, they are crowded without mask, and the parents worried and want me to make this attention to you, and I hope parents can warn to educate their kids to obey the to be away with each other, social distance, and I also hope the teachers and the principals can announce that to avoid this crowded issue. Thank you.
Trustee Cook?
It's kind of an announcement, but it's really just I'm very proud of one of the kids that I work with at RCC. He's has struggled for quite some time with reading and just all academics. During this time at home, he went on Lexia. He put in over 3,000 hours, and it has changed his life. So thank you.
Trustee Leclerc, I do have an announcement.
Is that Trustee Sartori or Olmsted?
It's Trustee Olmsted.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to remind everyone that September is Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. So for the almost 200,000 children who will be diagnosed with childhood cancer this year, and for those who face cancer diagnosis every single day in Canada and across the world, this month is a time for increased awareness and ask for increased funding and a reason for us to advocate, because the kids fighting are not really given quite a fair chance, because a lot of the treatments that they're facing are ancient treatments, and we really need to use our voice and this month to advocate, because our kids and many, many kids in our board face childhood cancer, as do their siblings, and this month is a time to do that. So I ask you to wear gold and support local organizations like ChildCan, who help local families who are going through cancer diagnoses, and just use your voices and be loud and try to advocate for those kids who can't advocate for themselves. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other announcements? With that, we are adjourned.
Yay!